Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to both of you. How are you doing today? Okay.
Yeah. How are
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
I'm great, thank you. And great to be able to talk about this very original and very unique film. Maybe for people who don't know anything about it, you could kick off with a brief introduction. What can people expect? Okay, go with you, Bastian, first.
Oh, Carrie, can you go first?
Oh, you! Who's
Yeah, sure.
you in it? There we go.
Sure. Um, so one of these days is loosely based on competition that takes place in the U.S., specifically in the mostly in the southern part of the U.S., where people are in a competition where they stand around and put their hands on a truck, and the last person holding like, with both hands on the truck wins the truck, and it can go on for days and days. So it is a definitely a an indictment of capitalism and what we do in this country and in the world even to kind of exploit people who are maybe not as well off or as fortunate to have enough money to buy their own trucks or have their own houses or their own lives, and have to rely on things like this to make it in the world.
Hmm.
And for you, Bastian, I mean, what was your way into this story? Because of course, yeah, it's a true life thing, and then there was the hands on the hard body, and I think there was even a musical at some point. So when did you first hit upon it, and what made you think it was going to work so well for a film?
Yeah, I had heard about it, I think in 2009 or 2010. My wife, she lived in Texas in the 90s for a long time. She told me about this documentary, Hands on a Hard Body, and about the contest in East Texas. And she described it, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I watched the documentary. I liked it, but also the documentary didn't seem very critical of the whole competition. And I immediately thought, wow, this is really like exploiting poor people for entertainment. And the doc, although I liked it, it's a good film, but it didn't really look at the competition from that angle. And so I thought, okay, that's my next film. That's what I want to do. A film about this and about how we live in a system that actually exploits poor people for entertainment. You can see it in reality TV or things like that. Actually, I think you in the UK, you had a show about the touch the drug thing for one season. I don't know how it comes across for reality TV if people just stand there with one hand on the truck. But so anyway, this was my inspiration, and then I researched more about this competition, and I came across this drama that happened in, I think, 2005. And once I read these little news bits and pieces, I was like, okay, this must be in the film. That's a big part and an important part of that film. And yeah, this is how it started.
And for you, Carrie, what was the initial appeal for you? Because, Joan's a really interesting character. You sort of feel a lot of empathy for her, I think. How did you go about preparing to play her? And how did you see her as a person?
Well, the script came to me and I was just blown away. First of all, I couldn't believe that a German writer director wrote it because it felt so authentically Southern. I grew up in Georgia. It just felt really authentic to me. And I really appreciated the way Bastian handled the role of Joan because you could make fun of her. It could be something where it was insufferable or we were poking fun at her. And I never felt that way when I read the script. And I certainly went about trying to make sure that we made her as complicated and interesting. And yes, sometimes humorous. I think the film needed that. But also, understanding the desperation that she has, even though she's at the helm of exploiting these people, she herself has this deep hole inside of her and this deep need to have a purpose in life. And and a deep need to justify what she's doing by trying to make it seem like it's really fun. And so there's this, curating of her own life, really, that I think a lot of us do, certainly now in the social media world. And so I was drawn to that side of her, and just to be able to have a role where you could kind of breathe and stuff on camera. Like Bastian really took his time in the shooting of it. Was a thrill. I do a lot of television, and it's just like a very fast pace. And so, it was nice to be able to relax into a role like that, and really get inside the skin and sit there inside this person and her desires and her needs and her flaws and stuff. So I was in good hands with Bastian.
And from your perspective, Bastian, how did you decide on your cast, particularly with Carrie, but also Joe Cole, who perhaps wouldn't be the most obvious person that would spring to mind? I mean, things I've seen him in, very kind of like rooted in British culture, going back to Peaky Blinders and things like that. So, and he keeps popping up in very, very different roles. He seems like a very interesting actor to work with. So how did you decide on your cast?
Well, it was Joe, so I had seen him in Peaky Blinders, and I thought what I really like about him is that he can look very almost still like a kid, but he has also this aggression that he can play, and what you see in Peaky Blinders. And so I really liked this about him. We were like, okay, he's British, can he pull off the accent? And but we had a dialogue coach on set the whole time, and I think with him coming to Louisiana where we shot, I think 2 or 3 days later, he started just talking in this accent, and he was basically for 6-7 weeks just in this accent. And then we had our rap party at the end of the shoot, and suddenly his British goofiness came out again. I was like, hey, you've been gone for 6 weeks, now you're back. And so it was really interesting to see how he changed and how he stayed in the character. And with Carrie, I had seen her in True Blood, of course. And what I like about her is that she can be very funny. She has a great timing. Every take can be different, but every take is great. I've never seen this before in an editing room. That we always did like little variations, like a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit this, a little bit that, so that we just have options in the editing room. And I never experienced this before, that you have like, let's say 9 takes or 10 takes of one shot, and they're all great. They're all different, but there was not one. Normally you say, okay, we forget about this, this never happened. And so that's what I like of her, a great timing. You feel that she comes from theater, playfulness, and still, although it's like playfulness and theater and improvising, it's always on point. And so that's great. And I knew that she, although she's funny and she can be very funny, wouldn't fall into, let's say, the trap of making fun of the character. So this was important. Like Carrie said too, it was important to be very honest with these characters and not make fun of them. Then the whole film, that's actually the point of the film, not to make fun of those people.
And can you tell us any kind of real things you remember from the shoot? I mean, watching it feels like the heat and the sweat is sort of like coming off the screen. So I don't know how much of that was acted and how
very
much of
real.
that was genuine.
Very real. Very real.
Some moments stood up for you?
Yeah, very, very real. Oh gosh, there's so many things that didn't make the cut, as happens. But we were working alongside these train tracks. And, there were so many times when we'd be shooting and then this train would come and then we would just wait. And then Bastian wouldn't cut, we would just incorporate that. And so I love that about, this film, was that it really did feel like we were all living in this world. We weren't just doing like, okay, and action and you say your few lines and you cut. It definitely had a way of breathing. And I know all the actors that were around the truck. I mean, they definitely felt like they were in this competition because they would be standing there for, 10, 12 hours, and the sun's coming down and the rain, like all those scenes where you see the rain, that was real, that was not manufactured. And, it was pretty great, to be able to kind of take the cues from what was actually happening around us and incorporate that into, making the authenticity of the film really sing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think I'm almost out of time, but just final question. I mean, you hit on quite a few things at the beginning there. What do you hope people take away from watching it? Because it feels like it does sort of hit on something that, like how we do exploit people. And like you're mentioning about reality TV, like, and there seems to be just more and more of these shows. It seems an endless appetite for that kind of thing. And what does that kind of say about us as a society? And what does that say about, how capitalism and consumerism sort of taken over our lives?
Yeah, I think it says a lot about how we treat each other, and that's not very good right now. It hasn't been very good. That's one of the main reasons why the film ends with this part that goes back in time with Joe's character, because we tell a little bit of his story at the end of the film. So normally you see like 20 people around this truck and you see 20 yellow shirts, but you don't know about their story. Why did they decide to do this competition? And so in going back in time and telling a little bit of his story, he becomes a real human being later, not before. And then we start to understand, oh yeah, right, these are people that we watched. And he's basically representing all of them. He's one of 20 and everybody has a story. And so I think to end with this part makes the film stronger in the statement that it does, that, that we are all human beings and we are not just a mass of people or just like something that we consume or take for entertainment. So yeah, I think this is the point it makes. I think it's a very political film.
The other thing that struck me when watching it is that I feel like sometimes when I watch films or TV shows about the US, it always seems like one extreme or the other. Like you have sort of, the very, very wealthy people. Like, I don't know, some of the series you've seen was like, say, Nicole Kidman in, like Big Little Lies, and this sort of lifestyle, like very, very lavish. Or we're really kind of on the margins. And I don't know if that's kind of a reflective of maybe the perception of how things are, and then the reality for a lot of people is probably closer to some of the films that we see like this. So what do you think that has to say also about American society? I don't know if you have anything to say to that, Carrie.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a divide between the haves and the have-nots. I mean, you could say that for your country as well. I mean, it's there. And I think what this film captures really well also is the empty promise of things. This truck, which is a thing, is what it represents to a person. These people think if they get this truck, then everything is going to be better. Their lives are going to be better. Like the symbolism of that. And of course, anybody who has the great fortune of having something like that, it doesn't always mean that your life is suddenly going to be better. And so there is, a kind of a spiritual void that I think that the film addresses as well. You kind of lose sight of what matters. And that's why, going back to what Bastian was saying, it's so lovely when we do go back and we see Joe's character, Kyle, with his baby and with his girl, the mother of his child, like before, things go dark, those simple moments that are so easy to either take for granted or, that get hijacked by this American dream.
Well, I think I'm out of time, but can you quickly just tell me what each of you are working on next?
Bastian's doing a movie about Mars.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
He's doing a sort of science fiction movie, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I just came up with the expression. I call it a fake science fiction film. We'll see. We'll see.
And you, Carrie?
Yeah, I just did a movie with Alexander Payne that's coming out. And then I'm going to do some work on The Good Fight, which is a spinoff of The Good Wife. And I've been involved with that for a while. So I'm going to reprise my character on that for an episode, but then I also am going to direct another episode for them. I directed one last season. So I'm jumping back into the Good Fight world.
Very cool. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you both. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and can't wait for everyone else to get out and see this film at the cinema as well. Thanks so much.
Yay. Thank you.